I'm here at Aviation Carbon with Dirk Singer from SimpliFlying. Dirk, it's really good to see you.
Thank you.
I wonder if you could characterise what this event is like for the aviation sector and the sustainable aviation sector.
So Chris, who the organizer, he first started this 12 years ago. So he's very much a pioneer and an early adopter in the sustainability space, because obviously in 2012, far fewer people were talking about this than there are now. And he's grown it to the extent that this is, one of the events where you find much of the sustainable aviation community all in one place. So you have SAF companies here, people talking about eVTOLs, you have people talking about ETS, about carbon offsets, about carbon removals. There was a session earlier, a lot of different facets that you come across here. I'm taking part in a panel later on this afternoon, actually the last in the day, which is all about aviation's social license to grow. And that's obviously a sort of, comes to the crux of what we're actually doing here. I mean, we're all aware that aviation is is a carbon-intensive business. We have goals that we have to meet, starting obviously with the SAF mandates in 2025. There are some question marks about whether we're going to meet them and whether we will be able to both have those targets in place and to be able to fly more people and to grow. I'm fully in favour of the further making flying more accessible and widening it to more people. But we have to find a way of doing so, without increasing our, already large carbon footprint. Now, of course, one of the issues is, is that 80% of the planet does not fly. And even here in the UK, most people are infrequent flyers. People who fly typically only do so once a year, on their, family vacation to Tenerife or wherever they happen to be going. And so a small proportion of people, of which I'm one, account for most of the flights. I personally believe that those of us who have benefited the most from aviation and those of us who fly the most should contribute something, to aviation's decarbonisation budget, which is due to be over $4 trillion. And there are a number of schemes around, as I'm sure you're aware, that propose putting some kind of frequent flyer levy on people who fly a lot, and then that could help, pay for a lot of the decarbonisation costs that aviation faces.
And if there was some kind of levy on frequent flyers, how in practice is that going to work? Presumably that is tied to the individual, and so it would require global cooperation to achieve that. So,
first of all, there's various schemes around. Some are done by climate groups, and the one that I personally am in favour of, and it's in the book, is from the ICCT, the International Council for Clean Transportation. And they propose some kind of global levy, and the first flight you take is free. So people in the so-called global south who've not flown before, people who go on holiday once a year, that would be fine. The second flight is $9. So let's say you're going to visit family and friends, not a huge cost. And then there's a sliding scale, and it goes all the way up to, I think it's $177 for your 20th flight. Now, I would argue if you're flying 20 times a year, you're probably doing a lot of times for work. You or your company can afford a $177 surcharge. And that seems reasonable. It allows for us to pay for aviation decarbonisation while applying a polluter pays principle. As you say, how do we actually implement something like this? And there's a lot of question marks about how we do it. I think that when I spoke to the ICCT, they said maybe it would have to be done through a body like IATA, so the airline body. Obviously, airlines right now are against this idea because it taxes their most profitable customer segment. But I believe that let's look in maybe 2030, I think we'll be looking at this question again.
Having been around the block, a number of years, Dirk, are you optimistic about our progress towards aviation net zero?
I am, and the reason why I'm optimistic is because I speak to startups every single week, and I speak to people who have great ideas, who are committed, who feel that they can make a difference. The key, as always, it comes down to money. How are we going to fund all this?
And is funding the biggest blocker that you see? That's the one kind of like piece of the puzzle we need to put in place?
Absolutely, because this is a very capital intensive industry. To create a clean sheet aircraft, let's say electric or hydrogen, is going to cost you $2 billion plus from start to finish. To open a new SAF plant is going to cost you $700 million. Now,
we need 2,500 of them.
Absolutely. And there was an analysis done by Deal Room earlier in the year, which showed that outside of the SAF space and outside the eVTOL space, only 5 companies have raised more than $100 million in VC funding. And that is Hot Aerospace, Zero Avia, Aviation, which is an electric aircraft company that they're private now, Flying Whales, which is a sort of a sustainable cargo company, and then Surf Air, which is a kind of a marketplace for electric aircraft.
Dirk, what is the Dirk Singer roadmap towards a sustainable net zero future? So obviously, you mentioned new aircraft there, but that can take 10 years at least to get it into service. So, everybody's looking at that. What's your roadmap?
My roadmap is making more use of carbon removals, not carbon offsetting. Carbon removals were obviously where we capture the carbon and then permanently store it in the ground. Fostering the most efficient SAF pathways and companies. There's some companies in the e-fuel space doing some fairly innovative work, which really claim that they can drive down the cost of e-fuels. And I spoke to one startup in Nova Scotia called Aeon Blue, and they claim they can be making cost-competitive e-fuels dependent on funding by 2031. So fostering companies like that. And at the same time, I think we have to move towards true zero solutions. So, new propulsion system, blended wing aircraft, done with the likes of Jet Zero, which totally reimagines what an aircraft should look like. And they already claim that their design is 50% more efficient than the standard design you have today. Hydrogen and obviously electric.
Dirk, you're speaking on the panel later, and your book, which I've read, Sustainability in the Air, is fantastic. I'd really recommend anybody who's interested in this sector and wants to come up to speed to read it. I wanted to thank you for taking the time to speak to me today.
Thank you so much for the kind words and for having me on your show.